Good day, everyone, and welcome to another live stream session. No one has joined in yet, so for the benefit of those people who are watching this video later on, I'm faceting a piece of fire opal from Arizona, and I need to thank one of my subscribers, one of my patrons, a lovely lady from the USA. Her name is Tam, and she sent me this piece of fire opal, which I've already got through the first stage of the pavilion, and I've always wanted to facet this type of fire opal from the USA because it's not hydrophanic. So we're just waiting for people to join in, and then I'll get started. And I've left in my community tab some description of the time that I'm starting. Hey Popamono, how are you going, mate? I'm just waiting for a few people to join in. I've got a new webcam, by the way, so hopefully things are a little bit clearer. So it's widescreen also. And we've got Uperman, so good day to you. Welcome to my channel. I haven't seen you before, so hopefully you enjoy this live stream we're about to do. If there's any questions, I know more people will join in later. But we are faceting a difficult gem, and fire opal is not an easy gem to facet. Oh, we've got Tony C, and we've got Ray. So hello, Ray and Tony. I haven't quite started yet, so we're only in the first minute, and we're just waiting for people to join in. We've got Alexander. How are you going, Alexander? William Gemstone. So obviously Alexander's right into gems. So not sure how many people are going to join in. It's really targeted for Australia and the US because I think depending what state in the US you're living in, it's probably going to be anywhere from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So good day to Ricky and oh dear from Brazil. So we have someone from Brazil. Very good. So I'll be faceting fire opal from Oregon. And I think I faceted fire opal from Africa, from Madagascar, about 3 or 4 times. The first 2 times I failed fairly miserably because it's the type of gem that chips a lot. Opal is not an easy gem to facet. It's the Australian opal. People say, oh, why don't you facet Australian opal for a start? What Australian opal I have is very little, and it's not even worth faceting, and what is worth faceting is going to be that expensive that I just simply wouldn't have the funds. Australian opal is super expensive, and it's not a lot. Most of the time, it's not actually thick enough to facet. It's more designed for cabbing. So it may be Australian opal that is facetable. There has been a new find in Western Australia several years ago of Western Australian fire opal. Secret location, as you know, all these locations seem to be in Australia these days. But if you look on Facebook, type out Australian fire opal, there is actually a Facebook site. So that's worth looking into. There's not a lot of posts. Hey, Chris Stokes, welcome. So that's for those of us who are Aussies. It's worth investigating that fire opal. I haven't seen them sell any rough, so I have no idea about the availability. Just going to have a quick cuppa, and then we're going to get started. If there's any questions, go for it, because now is the time. And I'll just keep an eye on my computer screen while I'm faceting, and I'll try to answer any questions while I'm trying to facet the girdle. So Uperman comes from Peninsula, Michigan. So welcome to those people from Michigan. Okay, have you ever faceted Mexican fire opal? No, and I think it's in some ways it's probably similar to the Oregon fire opal. It seems to be maybe a deeper red. I don't know. I think it's non-hydrophane, So for those of you who understand a little bit about gemology, there are various types of opal that are hydrophanic, or what they call hydrophane. Some, which means basically that there are types of opals that are water or liquid absorbing, and such hydrophanic opals are the wellow opals. There are some that are not with the wellows. Wellows are pretty common to be hydrophanic. Most African fire opals are hydrophanic, but it's actually, this one is not, because this has been dried out for many years. So Tam has told me. So it's not absorbing water because we've already cut the pavilion. So when I got it, it was in perfect condition. Usually real cloudy if once the water starts to leach out of them, and then they suck up the water. It's really not a great gem in some ways, those hydrophanic opals. You put them away looking beautiful, and then a month later they look all cloudy, and you have to actually store them in a little plastic bag with a little bit of water, so it'll always constantly got some sort of moisture around them. Also with the hydrophane opals, they're common for crazing. So they get all these little hairline cracks throughout on the surface of the opal, even after faceting and during faceting, depending on the longevity of the time you're faceting. So obviously, when you're faceting, it can take a week or two. And so while your opal's sitting on the dop, it'll start to craze. Just reading other questions, and I'm going to start. Okay, so Outer Rocks supplies fire opal. I'll have a look at that later online. One of the things about buying any sort of gem from the US, you can almost triple the price these days, and then you've got postage. So I would imagine it wouldn't be very cheap. Anyway, I'm going to get started now. With this, to me, when you've got small gems, this is going to be an 8mm gem, which is actually not a bad size. I actually do like gems anywhere between 8 and 10mm, and they're my favorite sizes. Once they get over 12mm, the time to facet the gem seems to almost double. And when you've got a gem under 6mm, they start to look a bit on the small side. So 8mm gem is pretty good, because you can this can be worn in a pendant. It's not going to be the type of ring you wear in a setting on a type of gem you wear in a ring setting, because it's going to scratch. Okay, so this is the critical time. So I've got to go really easy and use a lot of light pressure. When you're dealing with smaller gems, I find a smaller gem, for some reason, it doesn't happen often, could happen in this video. I've had it a couple times with cubic zirconia. Of all gems, any gem that's got a waxy surface tends not to adhere as well with the Devcon glue. So I'm using Devcon 2-part epoxy glue, but I've noticed as I've rounded out, so I'll just spin this around. So I've rounded out the gem, and I've cut a bit through the glue line, which happens a lot with me. And sometimes, you don't want to cut through the glue line, but what happens 9 times out of 10, I tend to, and I think a lot of faceters do, because you encounter a problem. With this gem, I'll make a video of it later, but it had a little inclusion running through it. So you're trying to cut that out as you're rounding it out. So basically, got it on the plate here, and you're just twisting, the quill. So you're just trying to get the gem to size like that. So I've cut through the glue line, which is not good, because when you cut through the glue line, it can get water in it. You can get detachments, particularly with super glues, those CA glues. Not as much with the epoxies, and I've used epoxy. So I'm going to start cutting some of the facets, and then I'm going to be explaining a little bit about how I intend to remove this gem later on, because this is the critical thing with opal, how you get it off the dop and not apply heat to it. So I'm going to explain what I'll do, and hopefully that works out. I wanted to try, believe it or not, and I think it would really work on the pavilion. I wanted to try the hot glue. I've got a hot glue gun, and that would be probably good on the pavilion. I'll do an experiment on a gem that's not as valuable, but I have a feeling more so when you've gone on to cutting the crown and you've got a dot on the pavilion, you can use hot glue. And on sensitive gems, like, for example, fluorite or fire opal, anything that's heat sensitive, I think the hot glue would do really well as long as you're careful. And the way you would detach it, you would use isopropyl, rubbing alcohol. That just a little drop of that would, boom, it's straight off the dot within a second, while water doesn't detach. It's actually quite strong, hot glue. So let's get into this and see what happens. So we start off with index 4. Yeah, look, Tony says hot glue is bad, too soft, not hard enough. Depends on the hot glue. There are good quality hot glues and there are bad ones. There are certain ones around where you do pay quite a bit of money. I think from what I've seen of the hot glue, I think it's got a bit of flex in it too. So you have to try to avoid any flex because the glue tends to be a little bit on the rubbery side. So that would demand a very deft, soft touch. But you look, I think you have to, with this, it's like anything. Not all glues are glues. You've got high quality hot glues. You've got cheap ones from a $2 shop. If you find the ones that are of the high quality, it may work. This is something I want to test out. Hey, Dean, how are you going? Where do I get my synthetic ruby bulls? Well, I get them from China, from Star Gems. So if you type out Star Gems Alibaba, that's where I tend to get them. They vary in prices. The clear is probably around 150 to 200 a kilo. Probably gone up probably by now, probably more these days. That's US. So in Australian prices, you're talking 270, maybe 260. And then you've got the 45 postage. So postage is in US dollars. So you're getting up well over 300 Australian. It's a sort of a lot better from a point of view if you live in the US. Okay, I'm going to get started. So hopefully I've answered a question where I get my ruby bulls from. Ruby is pretty cheap too. So the two cheapest sapphires are the ruby and the clear. And then you get into the other colors, the blue. Now I've been quoted with the blues around $500 to $700 US a kilo. That's a lot of money in Australian terms. So you're getting up around $1,000 for a kilo, and so, you're going to have a hell of a lot of blue sapphire. So you're probably better off to try and sell it. Hi, Diane. Welcome. Can fire agate? Well, I'm faceting fire opal, but I don't. Look, agate's pretty hard. Usually with an agate, you would make them into a cabochon. So I think agate's got a hardness of about 6.5. So it's a nice stone to work with, agate. But I'm faceting opal. So let's get started. I'm going to run at my lowest speed, and I'll probably too much water because I only need a bit of water on the outside of this lap. Using a fairly worn 800 grit lap, so I don't need to go too hard. Opal is fairly soft, so I think on the most scale, it wouldn't be any more than 6.5, I'd say, from memory. I'll look it up because I think some opals are a little bit harder than others. So I'll check out the fire opal. So I'm going to go pretty gently on my first facet. Let's see where I'm at. Actually, I'm using no hand weight. I've actually, see, I've got my fingers under there. I'm just sort of using the weight of the quill. Go down a little bit deeper. I'm not interested in rubbing the gem side to side like that. I'm just going a little bit down to depth. And I think I've gone down to depth as far as I want to go. And I'll go on to my next facet. And I'll read some questions quickly. Hello, Michael. Welcome. Randy. So, higher learnings. Welcome to you. Is fire opal hydrophane? Actually, I answered that question before, but yes, African fire opal is hydrophanic. Most opal from Africa tends to be hydrophane. Australian opal is not, and there is fire opal from Western Australia. Apparently, that's not hydrophane. This is Oregon fire opal, and it's not hydrophane also. So it's kind of easy to tell whether they're hydrophanic. Like if you touch them, they have a real sticky feel. Like if you lick your fingers and then touch them, they feel sticky and they stick to your fingers. They absorb the moisture. So no, this is not a hydrophanic opal, but others are, particularly from Madagascar. Okay, so Michael says he's found some fire opal in Oregon and he wants to facet that. So that sounds really good. Hopefully it's a nice, deep, rich red. And now Alexander, because I want to answer these questions a little bit, slightly off subject. Would you mind doing an in-depth video on topaz cleavage? Yeah, look, that's actually a good point. It's easy to spot a cleavage plane in topaz. I was taught by one of the members of my gem club because when I first started faceting topaz, I wondered about that myself. And I actually, in one of my videos, if you look up one of my topaz videos, I actually show you how you do it. So check out that. It'll be, I can't remember which one, but I actually do a macro video shots on how you spot the cleavage plane. And I even draw in the arrows of the cleavage plane. And when I facet that gem, it was absolutely bang on that I wasn't faceting on the cleavage plane. You know, I was cutting across it. So I avoided it altogether. So it's in one of my topaz faceting videos, Alexander. Okay. And Popo never saw the man behind the mask until now. Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Now, a lot of people, when they're faceting a girdle outline, I've cut down to depth, and they will just use the same height. I tend to not. I like to raise my mask. So what I'll do, I'll raise it up a bit again. I'll go on to the next facet, which is index 12. I've cut index 4. And rather than, just keep your height at the same level, I like to raise it and then check it and then cut down to depth again so it's nice and even. I want to get through this as quickly as possible, to be honest. So those who facet, do you leave your height at the same mast when you're cutting your girdle outline? Or do you just level it out? I like to just level out, like as I'm doing, raise the mast and then come down slowly again. That way, by doing it this way, I'm not applying pressure. As if I would leave it the same height, I could apply a bit too much pressure, and that means it'll start to step case. So any comments about that would be good. Tony. Oh, so Tony, do you keep your mast at the same height after you've cut the first facet, or do you raise it and come down again? Sorry, I'll read that in a minute. So second facet's cut down to depth. So back on to the next facet, index 20. I'll raise the mast, come down again. And see where I'm at. Oh, same height. See, everyone has a different technique. I guess it's I think I prefer doing this way. When I'm cutting pavilion facets, I'll leave it the same height. I guess you can always go around quickly and then redo it, but I don't want to do that because I want to keep as much weight to this gem and size as possible. So I don't want to hopefully overcut and have to go around and fix things up. Pretty much not using any hand pressure, just using the gravity and weight of my quill, even though my hand is on the quill, but I'm sort of just dropping it down and then back up, and that's it. Looking for meet points, and that's that done. So on to 28. Raise the mast a bit. It's just touching lower. Now, by doing it this way, and I know everyone's different, if you raise the mast and then slowly come down, you're less likely to overcut. Now, I don't expect any cleavage planes or issues with fire opal, but a while ago I was cutting some light, and even when I raised the mast and came down using whatever weight was in the quill from my hand, I overshot a facet big time. Actually, it's so rare for that to happen, because by doing the mast up and down on certain facets, it's pretty hard to overcut because you're using, you're making slight adjustments. But I found that very odd, and that's one of the reasons I kind of don't mind this method. My mentor was doing the same thing. Then you can't overshoot a facet. It can still happen, particularly on a cleavage plane. But there are different techniques. The advantage of what Tony said, if you just keep it at the same height, you don't have to do what I'm doing. Go to, lift up and check, and then look at the index number. So you're sort of less likely maybe to make a mistake. So me and Tony, we're in the same faceting group, and we had a competition a while ago, faceting labradorite. I failed on my first attempt. I don't usually like doing a redo, but unfortunately, I did a redo because it appeared that not many people were being successful at the time, and I just wanted to submit a gem just for the benefit of the competition, that they had people who actually would enter something. So I did get something completed, but pretty horrible experience, to be quite honest. In fact, lately with competition cutting, I haven't been enjoying it that much. Some of the designs have been just, in my opinion, quite ridiculous. Now, I've noticed when I'm faceting this, how it's really super soft, and certain facets are cutting just a lot faster than others. There's just no predictability in how fast each one of these girdle facets are being cut. So usually when you're faceting gems, you sort of, they're predictable, but this one is a bit different. It feels softer on one side than the other side. So when I started, it took a bit longer, and then the 3 facets further in, it's softer. So this facet's a bit slower. But I had a couple that just seemed to cut in real quick. And because I'm looking at my screen at the same time, at comments and things like that, I'm not concentrating as well as I should be. So that's another one done. So I'm on to 44. Raise that mast. And the thing is, when you're faceting, you can actually feel when you're hitting a soft patch on a gem. It's not a nice feeling at all. You just know. Isn't that right, Tony? You you just know when you've overshot. Right. I knew that with the Labrador, right? That was for sure. Concentrate. This is taking a fair bit, this facet. Right, that's done. Now on to the next facet, 52. Now I'm on the glue line at the moment. So this is the section. That's why the previous facet took longer, because you've got to cut through a bit of glue. This is the part I don't like. So I'll go real gentle on this section of the gem. The only advantage of cutting through a glue line I found once or twice with the cubic zirconia was that because you cut through the glue line, you actually can sort of redot the gem and just use the glue line where you cut through as a point of reference where the gem detached. That's about the only advantage. By the way, the glasses I wear, they're just for computers. Like I'm looking at when I'm looking at the gem, I actually don't use goggles. I look over the glasses because I have really great, for reading. Probably better than most, a bit like my mother. So I tend not to use goggles that often. Like you got the OptiVisors, mainly because, like any reading glasses, it tends to make your eyes weaker. And using OptiVisors, in my opinion, would do the same. So when I'm looking at the gem, I'm actually looking over my glasses. I actually never look through them. I just look through the loop. So I don't need reading glasses at all. These are just for computer. I'm short-sighted rather than long-sighted. Just keep concentrate. Just recheck. Yeah, just a little bit more. That's it. So that only had to go like probably a fraction of a mil, probably not even 1/20th of a mil to make that meet point. So that's all the time I needed to cut a little bit more to depth. If I would have held on another, say, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, I might have just cut a bit too low. This is very soft material, so if anyone wants to facet it, I think it would be a great experience. It cuts easily, but because of the soft nature, it will overcut real quick. So I'm nearly done with most of the facets. I'll try and whip through this section as quickly as I can. So I'll up the speed a bit now and just concentrate on getting this girdle outline done, because I'm looking to my left a bit occasionally at the screen. So I'm slowly cutting away from the glue line, and I'll have to be careful on the next facets, because what will happen, it'll start to cut in a lot quicker. Maybe the next facet won't be too bad, but the one after that will cut a lot faster. Just little things you've got to be aware of, I guess, is that if you've got little things like glue lines you've got to cut through, you've got to anticipate that the next facet, once you get out of that glue, is going to feel different. So So once I've cut this, we'll have a little bit of a question and answer time, and I'll tell you what the next section of this gem I'll be doing. I'll be doing a pre-polish on a copper lap. So this is going okay. So now I've got clean stone, no glue to cut through, and it will chop through it a lot quicker. I'll cut through it. And yes, it has. So this will go a lot faster than the previous facet. So that's done. And when you read, if any of you watch this facet, you'll notice how the previous 2 or 3 facets took so much longer, and that one I've just cut on index 76. It just flew through it because there was no glue. So that's a thing. It's hit depth, which I'm happy about, and that'll be the same with 84, I suspect. There's no glue to deal with, and it'll go fast, so I've got to really watch it. And see, that's already cut. That's how quick it went. So I could have actually overcut then, and it's hit the girdle outline perfectly. So I'm going to have to be really careful on my last facet, and this will be very tricky because it's not really a lot to cut at all. So last facet, the index 92, raising the mast and coming down because it's the last facet, shouldn't be much to cut. I'm going to mark that facet because I want to see where I'm at. Using a highlighter, I just want to see where I'm at because I've got two opposing facets next to each other. And it gets more confusing when you've got lots of facets next to each other. You've got to understand how far. That's it. So, yeah, I've got to go down a little bit more. And when you're cutting Portuguese cuts, there's so many facets that you actually get lost just trying to find what facet you're polishing or what facet you're cutting at times, when there's so many facets surrounding the one you're trying to cut. So this is, I just want to be gentle on this last facet because they have to meet. It has to meet up with the first facet and the last facet I cut. It's got to go a little bit to the left for whatever reason, not much. And that's it. So I think I've got a really good girdle outline. And my last facet was index 92. And I decided just to get a highlighter, mark just where it was, just as a reference point. It's just easier if you've got a reference point when you've got all these facets adjoining or coming to a final meet point. So any questions? And I'll go on section. Hopefully I can go on to a polishing section, but I'll go into a polishing section and I'll tell you what I'll be using for pre-polish. So please fire away with questions. Now I'm not under things, a bit easier to see what's going on the screen. These are just rubber pads I made up myself. Any rubber store sells those, and that's to stop splashing of water. So obviously when you've got your pan open, you're going to have a bit of splashing. As you can see, there's no water anywhere. I'm fortunate, and speaking to other faceters, sometimes the pan is not high enough, so that this here, the plate, is not recessed deep enough into the pan. So they get a lot of splashing, and you look at the setup, the amount of sponges they've got, and they've got trays over it. I really don't have a problem. The only problem occasionally is that when you start running it faster, the faster the wheel spinning, the more splashing. But I wasn't using a huge amount of water just because, as you can see, it's dry here, but I'm only using this outer edge where I need the water. A Sharpie, yeah, well, I think what do they call them? Permanent highlighters or something like that. We call them Sharpies or Texter. Okay, so I'm going to go on to my copper lap. Now, in the past, I've used Perspex for pre-polish. I know I have in my videos. Thing with Perspex, when you're using plastic and this type, any diamond paste like that, you can actually feel it heating up really quick. The copper doesn't heat up this quick. So Perspex is prone to heat build up, and because I'm faceting opal, that's the last thing I don't want. So the other thing is I use plenty of the gem down, so I'm going to wipe off that Sharpie highlighter, and I'm just using a bit of methylated spirits actually. So this is methylated spirits. Get that off. I'll keep it away from the glue. Methylated spirits dissolves epoxy glue, but I find that hard to believe, to be honest. It might take quite a bit of time. So no questions. I'm just reading through some of the comments. So many people have joined in. 26, awesome. And we've been going for 40 minutes. Just seems already time flies. So I'm going to grab my copper disc. Now, the way I store my discs, I keep all over here to the left, over here in a shelf, which is over there. Obviously, I keep my tin laps, so my final polish laps, and behind me, I keep my pre-polish laps. And it kind of seems odd that they're all apart, but I actually don't like, I would not store all my polishing laps with this lot. I like to keep them different spots. So I'll just get my pre-polish lap. So with all my laps, this is what I like to do. It's up to the person. You don't need to do it. I actually like to write on the back of them what diamond compound I use for that one lap. I've got other copper laps behind me. So I always use the same type of diamond on the same lap, so I'm not getting cross-contamination. So that's, to me, is important. Never, if you can help it, use the same lap with different diamond compounds. This one here is always going to be a 5 micron. So let's get into the pre-polish. Don't know what other people have used to facet opal, like pre-polished fire opal with. I find the diamond works pretty well on the copper. I've already tried it, and then I'm going to try my tin lap. So because this is a fire opal I've never faceted before, this is all new to me. So I'm in uncharted waters, because different opals from different parts of the world can behave differently. I know the Wellow opal, when I faceted that, it was a lot different than the fire opal from Madagascar. It was really hydrophanic, the Wellow. So Robert Stokes asks whether it does it dissipate heat. I think it does. I can just feel the heat on the perspex. You can feel it heating up. Extender or the oils in these compounds, and that's even if you're using diamond grip, once that extender starts to disappear, the lap will get hotter. But on a perspex lap, you'll notice that the oils, and the extenders within the grit, within the diamond compound, once it starts to disappear just marginally, it just starts to heat up real quick. You can feel the transfer in the gem actually as you're polishing it, and it's you got to keep replacing this. So with this particular diamond compound, it's called THK, pretty cheap, about $13 Australian for a pretty big tub, and I find it pretty easy. Just going to use a little bit. Some people might call that too much, but that's enough for my leg. And I'll just rub that in. So probably more concentrating on the outer edge, because that's where I'll be doing the pre-polish of the girdle. Now, that's probably enough. One of the downsides, I guess, with the copper lap is that they get black real quick. And when they get really black, that's when they can really scratch. Now, once you've used any diamond paste, I've got this rag here, and I'll just wipe my fingers clean. You just don't want to be getting diamond paste on your faceting machine. So keep a wet cloth, and pretty much after the faceting session, I'll get another cloth and use that. It's probably actually have different cloths for different diamond grades too. So, for example, you're wiping your fingers cloth with a fairly aggressive diamond paste, and then you go on to a final polish. You don't want to be wiping your fingers on the cloth that you got that paste on and then start smearing onto your lap. Now, with this, with any girdle, I like to go from my 90 degrees setup to about 89.5. So I'll just raise the height of this quill. So I'm going to lower it actually to about 89.5, and that should do it. Actually use my, yeah, that'll do. So I don't want to I don't want to pre-polish the entire girdle facet. I just want to pre-polish part of it. Now, because I'm using a different disc, make sure you raise the height, because it's a lot thicker, this disc. The previous disc was a lot lower. And because I've got oil on there, oil-based compound, I'm just going to lower. I'm going to start on index 4 again and just lightly touch, and the oil will tell me if that is flush on the facet, and it is. It leaves a little mark on the facet, so that is one of the great things about using oil. The other technique, I'll show you what you can do also. If you don't have any oil residues, you can wipe that off. You can get your pen, texter, Sharpie, highlighter, just mark the facet as I'm doing, and then raise your mask again, as I will, and just raise it and then lower it, and just lightly try to graze the surfaces. I can actually see it's touched where it's touched there, but I want to spin it around and just see. So it's actually a little bit slightly to the left. So again, and see how I go. And you'd know exactly the contact point, and that is bang on. So I don't know whether you can, yeah, you probably won't see it, but basically if I spin it around, you'll see a contact point where the lap is touching the girdle outline, and it's coming about, I don't know, 1/3 of a mil. So that should be perfect. And let's start the process again. I'll raise the mask again. This is how I do it, and just lightly pre-polish. And you know what? That's all you probably need. And that's it. Now the pre-polish, they are aggressive. So once again, you're cutting into a facet. So you've got to be really careful. So you go on to your next facet. I'm pretty confident it'll be pretty accurate. Make sure you choose the right index. Very important. Raise them up, come down, and that's it. I'll do that a little bit more. That's done. Now at this point, you probably don't have to keep lowering or raising the mast. You could leave it as it is. You'd be pretty spot on with repeatability, I'd say, at the moment. But I would just, out of habit, just raise it and come down lightly on the facet. That way, once again, it's not possible to overshoot a facet. unless you're faceting Labradorite. So that's actually, I've got 3 facets that are perfectly pre-polished, but you're actually taking a little bit off the gem. This is a really soft gem. So you're cutting into the facet and you've actually cut a little bit deeper. So while this is happening, you still got to make sure that girdle is properly level. So I've cut index 20, I'll go to 28. $36. Two. Yeah, look, this is going to go a lot quicker than faceting the girdle with the 800 grit, because all the facets are done. It's just a case of going around, making sure you've got a level outline on the girdle. Then I'll go on to polishing. That'll be interesting to see how the polish goes. I have no idea how that's going to pan out, to be quite honest. I can see where the oil residue is remained on the facet, so you know it's cutting in, and you know you're getting a perfect meet point too at the same time. Because just oil is a great marker. It leaves a nice bit of residue on that gem to tell you where you're at. So one of the downsides with cerium oxide on a perspex lap, you don't get that advantage. Just you got water everywhere. Actually, that one's got to come in a little bit more. It's index 84. Now, I'm just using the weight of the quill, not even raising the mask, because I've got to come in a bit, and I'm up to my last index, 92. I might come up on that one. Yeah. And just cut down onto it. You are technically still cutting into the gem or grinding into the gem. You're not really, you're doing a pre-polish, but it's still cutting. What? Years ago, one of the guys in my gem club, not really a faceter at all, he said, he always say, look, a polish is just a polish. You're not ever cutting into the surface, and that's not true. You're actually scrubbing away material when you're polishing. You're removing material. Of course, when you're doing a final polish, it's not as much as a pre-polish, but material still being taken away. It's that's not true, because if you need to even polish a girdle outline and you have to cut a gem a certain size, it wouldn't take much to polish undersize, even on a final polish, particularly on a tiny gem. Okay, so that's done, the pre-polish. So that's the copper lap. And one of the things I found with the copper lap is that they are so quick. Okay, so I'm going to read some comment. We've got Tony, Yupa, yeah, okay. So Yupa Man says, are the copper discs smooth? I think that they're pretty smooth. They're not as smooth as a tin lap, polishing lap. There's a little bit of an abrasive, slightly abrasive nature, but that may be partly because you've used more abrasive diamond grits on it, as you would with a pre-polish. So no, not as smooth as my tin lap. Just reading comments. Okay, so that's done. So the next step, I'm going to clean this up. I could probably put it away and reuse it later on, but I'm not going to bother. I'm going to clean it quickly and then get my tin lap, and I'll polish the girdle outline. Hopefully that'll work out. I have no idea. Hello to Seth. Welcome. Ricky says, I'm just not a big fan of unpolished girdles. And I've got to tell you, Ricky, me too, mate. I really hate the look of an unpolished girdle. You know what? I think 50% of fasteners wouldn't even have a go at polishing Opal girdles because they all say they keep chipping them. And that's true. Opal is a very chippy type of a gem by nature. But to me, I'd rather have a chip, maybe stuff up the gem a bit, than have to look at a gem after it's completed with a dusty looking girdle outline. It stands out a mile. I don't care what people say. When you've got a girdle which has anywhere between, say, 6 to 12 facets or more, and it's on a gem that's over 6 mil onwards, it really does stand out. You can see it in the setting. It's so obvious. And, like you got a really high refractive gem, like, say, zircon or sapphire, and even on synth gems. And you can see this girdle outline. It's just so obvious how dusty it looks. It's like that sandblasted effect you get. Anyway, I'm going to clean this. The reason why a lot of facetters, if they're commercial facetters, they don't polish a girdle because it's just one element of time saving. I personally think if you're buying a high quality gem, the girdle has to be faceted. Any jeweler or any person who's a faceter would really want to be polishing the girdle. Anyway, I'm going to clean this up. Just using WD-40. Grab a bag in a moment to toss this in. I usually, when you're cleaning up with this stuff, I like to put the tissue paper in a bag. It's pretty smelly stuff. You'll notice just a black that comes off it. This wasn't too bad after that pre-polish of the girdle. It's fun. No, I've never faceted an agate. I've just put this away. I don't know where you can hear me. I've got my headphones off. So I'm going to be polishing the girdle. I'm using a tin lap. I've used Perspex laps, but I found the tin last time I faceted Opal was a lot better. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to clean my hands. I'll get some. Just get a towel. Use that. Because I've used diamond pre-polish on my hands previously, it could be a bit on my fingers. So I don't want any of that to get on this lap. that 5 micron is a lot higher, a lot coarser grade than the 50,000 diamond I'll be using. This, yeah, it's good. So it's good to have clean hands, and I'll be avoiding that cloth. I've got that cloth I've had before. I will avoid that when I'm polishing. I'll just use paper towels. So the same process will occur. I've got my height adjuster at the same height, which means, and this is really important, a lot of you wouldn't want to be doing this. You go back to your index number, which is index 4, thinking, oh yeah, I'll just go straight into the polishing, and then you find you got a lap a totally different height, because this is a lot thicker, this tin lap, and that would be not very nice. You're going to dig right into it, so you're going to have to raise your height adjuster. That's the thing, you've got all different size laps, and so you're going to have to make all these little adjustments every time you change over a lap. Has anyone done that? Forgotten to adjust your height and gone boom straight down onto the disc without changing it, assuming that you're on the same height with the same disc? So I'll just read comments. Okay, Robert. So yeah, everyone sort of agrees an unpolished girdle is not beneficial. Okay, so this is, I don't know, a bit of an experiment. So I'm going to try, my gut will say use sewing machine oil on this. I could go with the Herco, but I don't think I need it. So I'm just going to put 1 drop on. Sewing machine oil is cheap. There's so many of these different oils I've noticed. There's specialized oils, they're not cheap. I think snake oil's not cheap either. So just running 1 drop around the outer surface mainly. And then I'll be using De Boer's 50,000 diamond grit. That's it there. I'll just put a little bit on the outer surface. And just rub that in. And so I'm always mindful that I've got this on my finger. So as you notice, I'm not using this finger. I'm not trying to touch anything with that diamond on. I don't want diamond on my quill. Don't really want anywhere on my machine. You know, it's all about contamination. So, you know, I'm going to be cleaning that finger. No, I won't be using that. I'll be using a bit of towel for a moment. Usually I have another wet cloth. So I'll just be cleaning that off, dealing with that, get rid of that, and I'll just spray a bit of alcohol on there and make sure it's right, come off. These are all these little steps. I hope if you're a faceter, you do this. Try to, you know, be clean. Yeah, I know it's a hassle, but in the long run, it saves you more time because you're not dealing with too many issues with contamination. So once again, I've got the height raised. I'm not touching the lap. I'm just going to lie down and just see where that contact point is on my first facet I'm going to polish. So I'm polishing the girdle. And because there's a bit of grease on there, you won't see, but it's marked the girdle. I'm going to do that again because I'm not 100% sure. I've come down a little bit too low. One more time. Just come up a bit more. That's better. So that looks like it's made a good contact point. The grease reveals where I'm going to be polishing on. Come back up. Now this is where I'm just using a little bit of gravity, like downward force from my quill. I'm not even going to be using hand pressure. And I've got to do a bit more. come down a little bit more. And it's always, being gentle. I'm just trying to move that diamond around a bit on the surface, get it underneath that facet. A little bit more, just got to tweak a little bit to the right with the cheater. And do that again. And that should be that. So that girdle facet looks like it's polished. Just a little bit more right on the cheater. And yeah, it's a little bit, be a bit better. Okay, so a little bit left. I'm going to come up a little bit. It's really such a soft, slick surface. Sometimes you don't even feel that the gem is on the surface making contact with a tin lap. That's how smooth they are. I do think it's working pretty well, the sewing machine oil, but it is a bit slower than the Herco. But that's already done. So one facet's polished. Yeah, and it's what I've noticed also, even as gentle as I am on this polishing, it's sort of biting into the surface of the facet. So it's cut a little bit lower, just enough to change the girdle outline marginally. So that will need to be straightened up just a little bit. So index 92. So that's done, and then I'll go on to index 12. I really don't know what the issue is with polishing girdles on Opal. It feels pretty smooth to me. I don't know where the chipping comes in. Don't know how that's possible, but must be. Feels like it's smooth as butter at the moment. Yeah, that's true. I'm reading these comments. Hard stop, you can overcut. And you'll overcut also because when you're coming in, well, most laps, they'll dip in. So on the outer surface, they're higher. On the inner surface, they're higher. If you've got a certain gem that's really soft, say for like this gem, and you've come across into the high zone, you will overcut, particularly on a smaller gem. It's amazing how fast this can happen. So your target area will always want to be in that hollow with these soft gems. Or if you want to really be precise, just keep your quill in one spot. But that will cause striations in the gem. I've got to tell you, I'm really not that happy with the speed of this sewing machine oil. Seems very slow. Also, I think I should actually adjust the height of this protractor just a little bit, come up a bit. So that these are just girdle facets. I think it's really slow. So I might actually try the Herco. So this is tedious. I'm going to change track in a moment and just see how I go with another extender. one spot on that facet the polish is not hitting, so I'm going to mark it and see what's going on. Just come up and yeah, it's got to come to the left a bit more. Okay, so it's sewing machine oil is working, but I reckon it's a bit on the slow side. It could be here for months. So that's 2 done. But I think, in my opinion, I'm going to go to the Herco valve oil. So 2 girdle facets are polished, but I think that's way too long for my liking. So what I'm going to do is just wipe this off quickly and go on to a different oil. Now, these are little things you've got to adapt as you go along. I mean, this is something I've never faceted this gem before. I find different oils, say, for example, sewing machine oil, I reckon is better than the Herco on some of the synthetic gems. Don't know what it is about some of these oils, but oils ain't oils. That's I don't know whether you've got this ad in the US, oils ain't oils. I think Mobile, was it Mobile Oil or Caltex? There used to be an ad in Australia about oils ain't oils with car engine oil. Okay, so I'm on to a new plan B, which is to try out the Herco oil, which is this stuff. And for whatever reason, it just, that diamond, it's a little bit more aggressive. So you can feel it biting in a little bit more. Put about 5 drops on. It's the same process again. You're just going to rub it in. This is a lot lighter weight oil. Viscosity is not quite, and it will dry out a bit more too. Let's try it. Let's move on. If this does better, I hope it does. Just wipe my hand. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my next facet, index 20. I've done 4 and 12. We move on, and let's just check out whether this is faster. Just check the height. Yeah, it'll come up a bit. So there we go. So now this Herco oil, as it dries out, you can feel it dry now a little bit. Might take a minute or two. You just add a bit more to it. You just, yeah, I'll just check that facet. I can already see that's done. Okay, so that's how long it took to do that facet. I'm messing around with the other oil, and it took forever, in my opinion. So that's already polished. That's just the difference between the 2 different oils. So index 28. I can just feel that it's not too much more grippier, but it's just a little bit more resistance for whatever reason. Tin laps are known to be absorbent, so trying to find the right word. But yeah, this is polishing really good, really good. Yeah, they tend to be porous, tin laps, so the porosity in these laps and the different oils that you use has a huge bearing on how fast things polish or how slow things can polish. That's literally just flying now. So there you go. Herco oil on tin lap with Opal is doing what it's supposed to do. I don't even need to look under a loop. That's perfect. 44. Now I can feel that oil drying out a little bit. So once you feel it dry out, you can just put a few drops on it. I guess you can feel when things aren't quite the same. So I'll just add a drop. And once again, you wipe your hands, do all the right stuff. So I'll just keep this in my hand. I reckon one of the worst things when you're faceting is choosing a wrong index. It's so easy to do, particularly if you're doing what I'm doing now. Got to concentrate. Definitely polishing at a higher level too to Herco oil with the 50,000 diamond grit. I'll go over the first two facets that I did. Index 4, 12, and I might have done 22. So I'll go over those. Sorry, I'm just trying to concentrate because I'm nearly done here. '84 and Funny, the 92 index has been the one that's been a little bit more out of alignment. Not much, but just not quite bang on like all the other facets on the girdle outline. So that's done. I might just go a little bit more to the left on the 92. I'll go over the first 3 facets. I'm pretty confident that that should go quick. And these are the ones I probably will mark because they're already been done, but sort of because I've polished them a bit already, they're a bit hard to see where I'm at. Yeah, so go that way. Because I made an adjustment on the 92, that means you're going to have to readjust for the index 4 next to it. And that's done. And then I'll go over index 12 and 20. So that's pretty much it for the girdle polishing. I'm going to have one more look at index 92, which I mentioned. It's been a little bit of that problematic facet, just getting a perfect meet point. It's not much out, but I will mark it. For some reason, needs to come a little bit left on the cheater. 92. That. Okay, so that's polished. So I don't really see what the issue is with polishing Opal girdle outlines. I think that's a pretty good polish for Opal on the girdle. So I might actually, there's no point polishing the pavilion facets. I can do that now. I would polish these pavilion facets, which I've already cut. They've been pre-polished already before I started today. So that's done. What might do, because I'll be signing off soon, I'll have a just questions and answers time for those people who've joined in a bit later. Sorry, you might need to watch the video. So basically, we've been faceting fire opal for the new people who've joined in from Arizona. Very soft gem, very unpredictable. Usually it chips a lot. It's not really a preferred gem that a lot of faceters would facet. I actually like the color. You're not faceting for scintillation at all. You're faceting because of the color. It has a really, really nice orangey red look about it, which is unusual. Not many gems look like this. Maybe looks a bit like one of those Madeira citrines, but it's just another aspect about faceting. It's a challenge. It's always good to facet something that's unusual, something that's different, because you always learn something. I've learned something today that, for example, the sewing machine oil was not good enough for the polish, so I went straight onto the Herco. Now, this could vary. I mean, people say, what do you use for polishing? And it all depends. There's so many variants, like how fast your machine is running, what type of hand pressure you use. Some people use a lot of hand pressure, some use hardly any, how much diamond you use. It's all these variables. So these are things you kind of have to work on. I had no idea how this would polish up. Even I had to adapt, and that's fascinating for you. it's things change every time you get a different gem, and particularly a gem you've never cut before, and you kind of got to learn as you're going along. And sometimes going on. So, any questions? Because I'll just scroll up and have a look at anything I've missed. Been here for over an hour. Okay, looks like there's going to be no more questions. People were chatting amongst themselves. I might have missed a lot of this conversation. Sorry. So I'm probably a little bit slower than a lot of faceters. I don't know. I might be faster than others. I don't know. I've considered myself to be a fairly slow faceter. When you see some Google interviews, and particularly interviews on YouTube with commercial faceters, it's just overwhelming that they can cut anywhere from 3 to 7 gems in a day. Given the fact that they're not huge gems, they're probably only anywhere from 4 to 6 millimeters. But I find that quite astounding. I'm flat out. I think the fastest I've ever done a gem in was with the Labradorite, because I had to get it submitted into a competition and get it posted off. And that, I was just flat out trying to cut that, and that took a little bit over 4 hours. Really did my head in, actually, cutting that fast. When you really feel when you're faceting at such a fast pace, you feel stressed out. Actually, it's not relaxing at all. I'd rather go a bit slower, and that's what I love about faceting. I find it actually quite relaxing if you're going at your own tempo. I could never be a commercial faceter. It would drive me nuts. So I think there was a question. So what was the question? I saw one. I'll have to scroll up. Sorry, I've missed this question. Maybe Tony's answered it. Something. No. Oh, yeah, here it is. Cliff, is that diamond polish? And what's he say? Is that if we're talking about chin lap, I'm using a grit. So I've used a 50,000 diamond grit compound. It's called De Beers. I get it from Gem Pro. This one here is for the pre-polish, which I used on the copper lap. And this is THK, and that's a paste. So this already has the compound already built into the paste. I need to add extra oil. Whereas this one here, you've got to use different oils. Actually, in point of fact, some people even just use water. I've never tried water. Not sure how that would pan out using just water. So I'm just reading another question from Jawad. How you going, mate? Have you considered a vid for total beginners with questions like these? Things like tools, costs, expectations. Look, I think if you go through most of my videos and it's one of those things, you can never do a whole video that will answer every question. It would literally take, 10, 20, 30 hours components to faceting. But what you probably find if you go through all my videos, you'll pick up a new little tip. For those people who've been watching the live stream, they've probably picked up a few little things like, hang on, this guy's used sewing machine oil. He hasn't been too successful on his tin lap. Oh, well, it went too slow. He decided to change things up. So he went on to the Herco. So, you'd be watching this video thinking, well, I'm trying to polish fire opal at home one day. You're having a bit of a stress out with polishing because it's going too slow. And then you see me using Herco. So you might want to try that yourself. Mind you could try WD-40. I didn't try that. That might have worked pretty well too. I don't know. I haven't tried it. But see, all these little things, I guess if you watch any video on YouTube, you're going to learn something a little bit new. The other day I saw a video where, and I kind of read about this, and I did it myself, where when you remove the gem from the final transfer, you can just boil it off because with epoxy, it'll release. I would not like to do that in this case because this is a heat sensitive gem. I have no idea it will pan out, but I wouldn't want to test. Well, I don't want to test it out. The other thing with fire opal, it's the concern with me, and I know this with Madagascan fire opal, the concern was always between transfers. And you think, how am I going to do this? My plan of attack, and I did mention this earlier, I would talk about this, so I'm glad I thought about it. My plan of attack, once I complete the pavilion, so it's all polished, done, it's got to come off the dot somehow, and then I have to do the transfer. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my scalpel hobby knife, I'm going to heat it and just take my time by cutting a little bit of the glue away first. Hopefully when I've cut enough away, I can heat the dot a bit and it'll virtually just fall off. Once the gem is transferred, and this is a tricky bit, you've actually got the pavilion in a cone dop. I'm not going to be placing any glue in the dop, but I'll be putting in a little bit of blue tack. For those of you who don't know, I don't know whether they have blue tack in the US, but it's a type of, I don't know, it's a rubbery, sticky compound we use in Australia to, you post thing. You can use it to hold things on walls like paper and, anything that's light. I use it on my dop sticks to hold the gem in. Actually, I'll get it and show you what blue tack is. That's basically blue tack. It's a soft, malleable type of, sticky, rubbery compound. Basically, it sticks on any surface. Put it there, as you can see, it sticks on any surface, and you can basically hold anything to that surface. That's what blue tack does. See, it just holds that, holding my doctor's surface of this pan. And so it's just the stuff you stick to walls. It comes off walls pretty easy without sticking. So I'm going to put a bit of this blue tack into, sorry, I nearly dropped my dot. I'll put a little bit into so that's your dot there. I'll put a bit in the base like that. Put the pavilion into the gem and then just try to glue around. I don't want the culet glued into it because when the time comes on removal, I know it will chip. So that would go for any other soft gem. That's my plan of attack. Put my headphones back on. Could you hear me? Because I had my headphones off at the time. So that's what I plan to do. Any final questions? Because I'm going to log off. Thank you for joining me on this live stream. Thanks, Tony, for answering the questions along the way that I've missed. Oh, any questions quickly? I can't read Spanish, sorry. Thank you anyway from those people from Brazil. Thank you for joining in. Tam's just joined in. Well, Tam, I'm faceting a bit of this Arizona fire opal, but you sent me, so thank you for that. So I'm going to actually sign out in a moment. You've missed out on an hour and a half of live stream, but you can always re-watch it, I guess. So just for Tam's sake, I already had the fire opal, the pavilion, the first 12 facets already cut, and I cut the girdle outline today, explained some of the without changing it. The reason I like doing it is then you don't get an overcut. You cut it facet in, and then you cut your next one, and you're just lowering gently, so you're cutting down to the same depth. Particularly on soft gems like this, they can be unpredictable. So if you just leave your height adjuster at the same height, and you just go right around, you just don't know what you're going to strike. You could overcut. Just a little bit of hand pressure too much will force the stone to dig in deeper into the lap, and you've already overshot the mark. So then I moved on to a pre-polish. I used my copper lap, which was pretty straightforward. Went on to this diamond paste, which I used, 5 micron. And then I went on to polishing the girdle outline. A few people we spoke about, Ricky mentioned he hated people who don't polish girdles, and I agree. And one of the things, a lot of people won't polish this type of opal. They feel that they will chip it. To be honest, I thought it was. I never felt it smooth. I started polishing once I got onto the polishing. Used my tin lap. Really had a slow process with this sewing machine oil. Just took too long. Went on to this stuff here at Herco and sort of just went around it, in my opinion, in no time at all. So that's just an update, and it was pretty, I don't know, I think it's a pretty slow process for me, faceting. I'm always a bit slower. But so far, I'm not really striking any issues. The only issue I've found was that, and this is something I've got to improve in myself, is not cutting through a glue line. It's something, I don't know, I just have never, I always strike a little issue, like this had a little inclusion in it, so you've got to cut through that inclusion, which means you're cutting through more glue just so you can get a clean stone. Because once you cut through that glue line, you can get detachments, and I don't want that to happen. Anyway, I've actually got through, in my opinion, I think this is the most difficult part I've done today on this video. Cutting the girdle outline and having, once I've got through this, I shouldn't get a detachment, because that's when I've always had all my detachments. I think I've had 2 or 3, I think 2. They have always detached when I've been faceting a girdle. Water gets around that glue and whatever. You seem to have a lot of, seems to be quite a bit of, because of rotation disc, but being flat, for whatever, it can grab a stone a lot easier than on an angle, in my opinion. Anyway, I'm going to sign out. Hopefully I'll be back at work, and if all is well, I'll do another live in a week or 2, and hopefully I've completed this gem, and I should make a video on it also, and so just see the process of how this goes. Okay, look, one last question. How much money is the machine? Well, it's a second-hand machine, but I think because it's an older machine, so hello, Burak, it's relative to how much people pay. I don't think it's worth much more than $1,500 Australian now, to be honest, second-hand. Personally, probably $1,000 tops, but it's a good machine. These days, machines tend to go for pretty hefty price. Don't have machines in Australia that are manufactured. Anyway, I'm going to head off because I can see I'm getting an unstable connection. I see that on my live stream. It's telling me the connections that's not that stable. So thank you for joining, everyone. I've tried my best to read comments. Really hard to concentrate. So take care. And until next time, I'll see you in my videos. And some of you I speak to regularly via emails and on Google, on these chats, on these what they call Facebook chats, and that occasionally. So until next time, I'll see you around now.